station, Kentucky's Conservative Outpost, the only program in Kentucky that deals with news and politics from a conservative perspective. So we're glad you're joining us. And this is an interesting year. We have, this is an interesting time of the year. This is 2024, early 2024 when we're shooting this. And that means the Kentucky Legislature is in session. It's been in session for about 7 days. I was just corrected earlier. I said it was in session today, but it's been in session for about 7 days at the time we're shooting this. And there's a lot happening this year. We have, of course, we just came out of a governor's race, a very highly contested governor's race, and the state decided whether or not it's going to have a Republican governor or a Democrat governor. But we already knew we had a Republican legislature, both in the House and Senate. So, and they have a supermajority in both chambers. So there's a lot of a lot of power and influence there on the legislative side to move things forward, despite a Democrat governor. And so that makes the legislature and the legislative session very important because they can get things done. They can, if they want to push something through, they can get things done. So to discuss that today, we've got our co-host, our intrepid co-host, Jim Waters of the Bluegrass Institute, and we also have Bob Scott on the line with us, and also we have a special guest today. We actually have a legislator, a Kentucky legislator. It's a State Representative John Hodgson with District 36, which is Eastern Jefferson County. So if you're watching this program in Louisville, he may be your representative. So let's just go right to John. And so John, you just came from the session literally a few minutes ago, and so tell us what viewers and what voters in Kentucky should be looking for in this session this year. What are some of the big issues, sort of the 50,000-foot view of what to look for this year, and then we can get into some of the specific issues. But what's important about this year's session?
Sure. Well, this is a budget year. We do a budget every other year. Constitution does require a balanced budget, so we got to equalize spending and revenues. Unlike the federal government, we can't print our own money here, so we have to balance the budget. And that'll take up some time. I am a freshman, so this will be my first time going through the budget process. But I've been working with that committee on a couple of things that needs in my district. Right now, in the last 6 or 7 days of the session, you have seen a flurry of bills filed, probably a couple hundred bills filed so far.
Wow.
I try to get through and read them all. We've got 100 people in there. If everybody files a couple of bills, there's already 200, but I know I already filed about 5. So I would not be surprised if we see 1,000 bills by the end of the session. And
wow,
not all this will get passed. Covers everything you can imagine. Some are big, some are important, some are silly, but the ones that are important, I think, will get to the floor and get a vote.
Got it. For those, I'm sorry, just for those that are just tuning into Kentucky legislative politics for the first time, because a lot of people are realizing that it's important to pay attention to local politics. Finally, it's I think it's just the way our system is running now. Local politics impact you more than federal politics. So So is that typical? 1,000 bills in a typical session? Is that normal? Is that?
It's normal. Yeah, I think the number that gets passed is substantially lower, but you do get a lot of bills filed because some people file a bill, their constituents see that and are happy about that, and that's as far as it goes. But when I filed my first bill a year ago, I thought, hey, I'm almost done. But that was step 1 of about 10. You've got to get somebody to notice your bill. You got to get it called to committee. You got to defend it in committee. Take a vote in there, pass that vote, and then take it to the House floor, start the process all over again, defend it on the House floor, take the vote, and then you got to go over to the Senate, find the committee chairman to hear it, do the committee hearing, pass the committee hearing, and then to the floor of the Senate. And then it goes to the governor's desk. If the governor signs it, you're good. If he vetoes it, the House has a chance to come back and override his veto 10 days later. So the one I got passed last year got done towards the last day of the session by the skin of my teeth, and I filed it on day 1. So it was
there we go.
A lot that goes on behind the scenes besides just filing the bill.
Well,
Frankfurt is basically built to say no. If anybody wants to pump the brake, it's easy to pump the brake. It's hard to get things to move forward.
That makes sense. Yeah, if we would have just put what you just said to music, we could have made another Schoolhouse Rock. It would have been great. I'm just a bill. I'm only a bill. You'll remember that? Shows my age,
right.
But there we go. Well, Jim, I want to hand it over to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, John. There's been a change in the process in terms of bills. In the past, bills have been pre-filed. We were able to see those bills before the session began. There's been a change in that practice. Can you tell us a little more about the thinking behind that? All these bills being filed now are, of course, after the session begins. But could you give us a little more insight about that process?
Well, first I'll tell you what I did with my bills. I wrote them and I got them introduced into committee, and I made my bill drafts public to the world last summer on the bills, and that's on the committee website. Mm-hmm. So
those are available. So legislators can put those on and make those available. Of course, there's been in the past, the bills were filed with pre-bill numbers, and it's been a change.
Yeah, the challenge is if you pre-file a bill, you can't change it anymore until the House is in session. You would have to amend it with a floor amendment or in committee. So you're kind of putting yourself in handcuffs when you do a pre-file. That rule changed before I came into office, so I can't speak to how well it worked or didn't work. But I'd say there's two kinds of people that did it. Some were more activist legislators that wanted to drum up support for a bill well in advance by doing a pre-file. They'd get it out there, get media attention, get supporters, get people calling in, but they're calling in at a time when nobody can cast a vote. So you might succeed in getting a few co-sponsors, but you're not going to get a vote on the issue. The other kinds of people would be lobbyist-oriented folks that would file a 200-page bill and pre-file it, and everybody goes through it in the summer, and then it would come to the floor very quickly for a vote. And somebody say, wait, I need to look through this. And say, oh, it's been out there for 6 months. Sure. We need to just vote, yes, this is good. And so
on the
reasons
budget,
to stop it and reasons to keep it going, I guess.
Yeah, with the budget session going on, John, we really have a much better situation in many ways. We've gone from being a state that had a very weak rainy day fund budget reserves to a state that has one of the strongest budget reserves in the nation. That's a good thing in many ways, but also I guess the question is going to be, will there be some attention given to that in terms of how do you want to see those dollars spent? How do you think that should be handled? I know the governor and his administration, they'd love to go on a spending spree with taxpayer dollars. But talk about what kind of dollars those are for a minute, because I think there's a big difference between if you create a program that must be funded in the future, a recurring expense, versus using those dollars for the unexpected, a tornado, a storm, a flood, a downturn. How important is that to you?
Well, it's super important. And I try to always refer to those monies in terms of days and not dollars, because people can't wrap their heads around, the millions and billions of dollars and how many zeros there are. But if you look at our entire budget reserve trust fund, we need about 60 to 65 days of reserve. So if something bad happens, if there's a financial crisis, if we have a natural disaster, we can operate the state without tax money flowing in. So right now we have I think it's about 65 days in reserves. When you express that in terms of dollars, it's in the billions. And people think, oh, it's a slush fund. We've got all the money in the world. Let's go spend it. But we need to always be maintaining the budget reserve trust fund at that 60 to 65 days. To the extent that we have money above that, leadership has expressed an interest in addressing one-time things, like, for instance, paying down our mammoth pension deficit. If you recall back when Governor Bevin started talking about that 8 years ago, we were somewhere around $60 billion in the hole, one of the worst pension-funded systems in America. We're better than that now. We're on a path to healing. We haven't let anyone new in the pension since 2014, and it's still going to take us 26 more years to pay off those liabilities.
Yeah. On that issue, we've heard a lot about spending for education. Of course, education is the single largest part of the budget, the general fund budget. What can you tell us about what the approach to that's going to be? I think it's gotten. I think it's not a lot of attention has been given to the increase in funding that the legislature has given to local school districts. That's kind of gotten lost in the message, hasn't it? We're spending a lot on education, and $1 billion a year on the teachers' retirement fund to bring that up to par. So what are your thoughts about that, John? And just
if you take every dollar we spend on education, K through 12 plus college plus teachers pension fund, it's somewhere around 55% of the budget. So it's an enormous expense.
We are here to defend democracy.
Misinformation poses a threat to our nation's health.
Climate change is an emergency.
Democratic socialism.
Codify one's right to choose.
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15.
That's kind of gotten lost in the message, hasn't it? We're spending a lot on education and $1 billion a year on the teachers' retirement fund to bring that up to par. So, what are your thoughts about that, John? And
well, if you take every dollar we spend on education, K through 12 plus college plus teachers pension fund, it's somewhere around 55% of the budget. So it's an enormous expenditure. And I think we increase the amount we spend on education every single year. And yet, even though we'll increase it to record amounts, the two words that I hate that you always hear is you need to fully fund education.
Yeah.
Well, nobody can put a number on what fully funded is. It's always more than what we've got now. And I think it's a ridiculous statement. I won't let anybody use that term in my office. You need to come in and say, here's what I want to do and here's how much it costs. That's fine. But, to constantly be saying fully fund is just is silly. We spend way too much per pupil, especially in JCPS, for the outcome that we're getting. We've got a third of our kids can't read and write, can't do math, and are not employable upon graduation. And we want to take that spending from 18, 19, 20,000 and keep increasing it. Coupled with that, we've got a ridiculous busing program that should have been dismantled years ago. We need to be going to neighborhood schools so that parents can participate. Let kids choose and go anywhere they want to. But if they want to go to the school that's a block from their house, they should be able to go to the school that's a block from their house.
Yeah.
And
well, on that issue, John, you're a co-sponsor of House Bill 208. I believe
Yes.
I've got the number right, and that was just filed. That would put a constitutional amendment on the ballot that would remove the barriers to school choice. Tell us about your thoughts on that and what kind of momentum that has in your caucus. What can you tell us about what we can expect on that? What needs to happen?
So last year, I am on the Constitutional Amendments Committee, and we did hear a version of that amendment last year, and we voted it out of committee. Mm-hmm. And we're doing that largely just to show that we had the votes to carry this forward to the House floor. I think the House caucus, we easily can clear 51 in the House. I think we probably do it in the Senate too. So I think it's going to happen this year. We're going to have to do some tweaking on the language. The key with constitutional amendments, it doesn't just need to pass with us, it needs to pass with all the voters of Kentucky. Right. And we've seen some very poor results in the last couple of elections when these things didn't get messaged right. People didn't understand what was being said. We get out-of-state concerns spending millions and millions here distorting the message about what yes and no mean. So we need to make it crystal clear that what this amendment does is let you take funds that are not part of the general school fund and allocate those to students at showing some level of financial need. That can be defined by statute, but a means-tested way to give kids and their parents money to go to the educational solution of their choice: public school, private school, tutoring, after-school program, literacy program, whatever that kid's needs are.
So
it's been done in other states. Kentucky's lagging way behind.
Right. So I'm glad to hear there's going to probably be some change, some work on the actual wording, right? So it's simpler and clear. Simpler. And will it also be means tested, do you think, John? We've had 10 other states that have really moved toward more of a expanded program offering more families and more kids choice. What do you think the appetite is among the caucus for that?
Well, keep in mind that if you say means tested, that could be somebody that's at the poverty line. It could be somebody at 400% of the poverty line or 800% of the poverty line. That line can be moved, depending on what legislation comes through. But it gets you past the constitutional blockage from what was referred to in the late 1800s as the Blaine Amendment that stopped you from spending money from the school common fund on any non-public school. And that's what we're working on this time. I think we need to be funding students and not systems and not buildings. I think kids need to be able to take at least the state portion of that money wherever they need to go to get their educational needs met. In other states, it's interesting that the kids that do that are the kids that are in public school with an IEP, or whatever they call it, the individual development plan. And it's the kids that are kind of considered somewhat special educational needs, and they are getting the attention they need in a more private setting where it's a school of 10 kids and they're thriving, whereas they be struggling in a public system.
We are here to defend democracy.
Misinformation poses a threat to our nation's health.
Climate change is an emergency.
Democratic socialism.
Codify women's right to choose.
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15.
Became very concerned because it was just too wordy, and
It's too wordy.
and they just said, forget it. It's just too wordy.
Yeah.
I'm going to vote no on it.
Right.
So John, outside of the budget, which is a huge issue this year, and also the school choice, what would be another issue or to be looking for to come out of this session, or another bill that you're rooting for? Maybe you're on your own or personally that you're pushing through.
Huge bill we launched yesterday is House Bill 5 called the Safer Kentucky Act. It's an omnibus bill full of crime-fighting measures. We had a press conference on that, getting a lot of attention about that bill. We've been talking about it for about 9 months. That's sponsored by the group of 7 legislators in Jefferson County, the Republicans in Jefferson County. It's going to be endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police. Virtually every citizen I've talked to is in favor of it. We get a few people who are on the fringes that object to it, but frankly, we think if you're a violent criminal, you need to be in jail. So that's what we're aiming to do, increasing penalties, decreasing the opportunity for outside functions to bail you out of jail. If you remember a couple of years ago when Mayor Greenberg, there was an assassination attempt that actually poked holes in the suit coat he was wearing.
Yeah,
as I say, the difference between attempted murder and murder is marksmanship. And the guy just missed him by, an inch.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that guy was bailed out by an outside organization that got money and put him back on the streets. And that's crazy. We can't do that. Violent criminals that are arrested and we know it was them need to stay in jail until they're adjudicated. And
beautiful. And that's a Safe for Kentucky Act. Safer Kentucky
Safer
Act.
Kentucky Act.
On that,
House Bill 5.
Yeah,
so
on that.
here's inside baseball, when you see a single-digit bill number, that usually means that leadership is behind it, and it's one of the priority bills that will get passed.
Oh, really?
So
okay, I love
the fact that that's House Bill 5 is very, very good.
Yeah.
On that bill, do you think there's going to be a couple of areas like the one you mentioned, the bail issue, and maybe, there's been a real increase in carjackings, at least over the past couple of years. I know there was attention paid to that. Out of that, all that, usually an omnibus bill doesn't pass omnibussly, although this could, I guess. But what could we be expecting in terms of priority in that omnibus, all those different parts of that?
We went through that process in the last 9 months. There were a couple of features that we debated and took out because they were drawing less support than the rest of the features. At this point, I don't see anything coming out. I think there will be some language changes, some minor tweaks, eliminating unintended consequences. The thing that's garnered the most attention right now is a part that I authored, and that's the street camping ban. We've all seen an explosion in homelessness. People pitching a tent behind private residences on the sidewalk,
right on the freeway,
between lanes on the interstate.
Yeah, right on the interstate.
Creating a public safety hazard. So we've got a feature in that bill that says you can't camp in those public places. You can only camp in a designated spot that the city can identify. A vacant lot, a parking lot, an empty warehouse, but it has to be a designated camping spot for you to pitch your tent. We're not criminalizing homelessness. Understand that people can be homeless for various reasons, but our intention is that we get those people into rehab. 70% of them have serious mental illness or drug abuse problems or both. The people that don't have those problems typically get into shelter or housing situation pretty quickly. The chronic, what they call unsheltered homeless, the people that are sleeping outside every night, frankly, a lot of them are there because they refuse rehab. The rehab centers go out and recruit, and they say, please come in. We've got a bed for you. It's paid for. And we've got dozens of those beds go empty every night because those individuals don't want rehab. Well, if you don't want rehab, but you also refuse to obey the rules of a civilized society, that's where the law kicks in.
So will this help force people into rehab? Or can we do that? Or I know some cities are doing that around the country. They're actually, taking homeless and say, you cannot be homeless. If you're going to stay in this jurisdiction, you are going to go through rehab. And so is that something we can do or?
No, it doesn't force them into rehab. I'd say it nudges them into rehab because it's going to be less convenient for them to be on the street.
Okay.
But it gives the city the opportunity to designate an area and say, this is our outdoor camping area, if you will.
I see.
And we would require them to have porta potties and drinkable water. For sanitary conditions. We don't need human feces on the streets, and we don't need the disease problems that causes. But we would also say, here's a central place where police, EMS, fire, service organizations, ministries can get in there and find the folks and say, please come to rehab.
That's right.
But step one,
help people. If
you're having serious mental illness or drug problem, is I've got a problem and I need help.
Yeah.
And I think those organizations are bending over backwards to help people that say I need help. It's the ones that say I don't need help, but I want to pitch my tent right in front of your business and ruin your personal economic situation.
That's right.
Because of my problem. That's what we're trying to avoid. So basically the law says, the police officer, the private citizen can say, hey, you need to move along. If they don't move along, the police officer can come and say, hey, this is illegal. If, I come back here and find you, I'm going to, write you up and take you on a misdemeanor. Nobody wants to actually do that, but they want to change the behavior. They've got to have the stick to say, if you don't comply, there now is a law that is going to give you a misdemeanor charge.
Well, that's
the
really
goal is not to put people in jail. The goal is to move people to that central area and or get them into rehab.
Well, that's really encouraging that the legislature is taking that issue up, because I think if we really care for people, if you really care about homeless people, you want to help them. You don't want to just let them live on the street and just we got to give them the rights so they can do it. Well, you really don't care about the person if you let them live in a tent on the side of the freeway. If you care about them, you would engage on this level. So that's tremendous.
Ironically, the charge from those on the fringe, like John mentioned, will be you don't care.
Exactly right. Yeah, and it's just the opposite.
But sound policy does look at how can we actually help people.
I think that's right. 70% of people, like you said, are drug addicts.
Nothing compassionate about letting somebody stay on the street in their mental illness and drug abuse, going into a slow spiral downward to premature death.
Exactly.
Because not only are they going to destroy themselves, they will affect the lives of a lot of innocent people around them on the way.
That's right.
Those people need to get help. So
that's right, and the quality of life of our community as well. So, all right. So, last issue, I'm curious to see if there's anything being dealt with in this issue. Immigration. Immigration's a hot issue in our country right now, in our city right now. Read an article the other day that 1 out of every 10 people in Louisville, for example, are foreign-born. God bless them. Right? God bless them. I hope that's fine if they're here legally. But my sense is there's probably more than 1 out of 10, because those are probably just the numbers they know of. I think you can probably get 1 out of 5 people probably in Louisville are foreign-born, and a lot of them are illegal. So is the legislature taking on that issue in any way?
Well, there really is not anything we can do under state law with that. We're not a border state. I mean, I think
That's
Texas is taking an appropriate measure, saying if you're coming across the border illegally, they're going to try to arrest you for that. I know the Biden administration is suing them for enforcing the law, which is an amazing concept. But no, I think in Kentucky we could try to make it a place that's not as welcoming to illegal immigrants. If your first act of getting in this country is to break the law and then to try to seek to live off the citizens that are here, that's a problem. We've got some very well-intentioned people that are coming over here to work and work hard, and that's great. Immigrants built this country. All of my great-grandparents were immigrants. So we need new citizens. We need people that embrace the American way of life, that embrace the Constitution. They want to work and pay their taxes and become a part of the fabric of our society. We don't need people coming in here that are criminals, terrorists, or expecting to live off the work of John and Bob.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. Well said. Well, listen, this is great. Well, John, thank you for your time today. This is exciting. So.
We are here to defend democracy.
Misinformation poses a threat to our nation's health.
Climate change is an emergency.
Democratic socialism.
Codify one's right to choose.
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15